Chapter: The Sphere Invitation. Midday, Miles stood on the rocky terrain of the ruins, through his ear set calm. With a confident yet urgent tone, he called Kira. "Kira, I need you to bring the sphere closer to our location," he said. Kira's voice crackled back with acknowledgement. "Got it, Captain! I'll be there shortly, but I'll keep a safe distance from the ruins to avoid damaging anything." Miles turned to Helena, who was examining the ancient carvings on a nearby wall. He stepped closer and in his polished British accent said, "Helena, we'd be honored to invite you to our home, the Sphere. Please do us the pleasure of accepting our invitation." Taking her hand with gentlemanly grace, he added with a smile, "It would mean the world to us." Helena giggled, a bit charmed and caught off guard by his elegant manners. "Yes, I'd love to," she replied, her voice warm. It was clear she trusted him completely now. Minutes later, the air shimmered as the sphere approached, floating with a hum of futuristic energy. True to Kira's word, it stayed at a respectful distance from the ruins. The sleek black ramp slid down gracefully, extending toward them. Helena's eyes widened at the sight, and she whispered, "It's incredible!" Miles offered her his arm, and together they walked toward the ramp, stepping aboard the sphere. The interior opened up before Helena as they entered the command center, its futuristic panels glowing faintly and the hum of technology blending seamlessly into the atmosphere. The team was waiting for them. Kira stepped forward first, her hand extended. "I'm Kira. Welcome to the sphere, Helena," she said warmly. Helena shook her hand, glancing around in awe. "Thank you for inviting me into your home," she said, her voice soft but sincere. Her eyes wandered, taking in every detail of the command center, the glowing consoles, the sleek design, and the unmistakable sense of advanced innovation. Jace and Theo approached her with friendly smiles. Jace grinned and said, "Finally, someone who can actually keep Miles on his toes." Theo chimed in, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Helena. I hope we can learn a lot from you about, well, everything." Even Damon stepped forward with a polite nod, saying, "Welcome aboard." As they exchanged pleasantries, Kira pulled Miles aside, her voice low but brimming with excitement. "Miles, she's absolutely breathtaking. I mean, seriously, her hair. What is she using? Starlight? Is there a secret Atlantean conditioner I need to know about?" "Kira," Miles interrupted with a smirk, his British wit sharp. "Must you reduce every new acquaintance to their hair care routine? She's an extraordinary woman, not a shampoo advertisement." Later, the group moved to the sphere's dining floor, where a round table was laden with an impressive spread. Golden waffles drizzled with syrup, creamy mashed potatoes, bowls of vibrant salads, juicy roasted chicken, crispy bacon, and a platter of desserts. Cookies, brownies, and cheesecake. Tall glasses of cola fizzed beside them, along with steaming mugs of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. Helena sat down, her eyes scanning the feast with curiosity. Tentatively, she picked up a waffle, letting the syrup drip onto her fingers. Taking a bite, her eyes widened. It's sweet, soft, and unlike anything I've ever tasted." She sipped the cola, her surprise turning to delight as the bubbles tickled her tongue. "It's like drinking stars," she said, laughing. When she tasted the roasted chicken, her expression softened further. "So tender, so flavorful. The spices, there's such depth to it." Kira grinned. "And this is just a regular meal for us. Imagine what we'd serve for a celebration." Helena smiled, her voice sincere. "Your food feels alive. Every bite tells a story. Thank you for sharing this with me." Kira leaned toward her, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "Okay, I have to know. What's the story behind your tattoos? And more importantly, how do you get your hair to look like that?" "It's radiant." Helena chuckled, a genuine laugh that made her eyes light up. "The tattoos are personal. They're stories of my family, my life, my beliefs. And as for the hair, I guess it's just the natural oils of my world." She smiled mischievously. "But I might have some secret remedies, too." Her smile lingered for a moment before fading into something softer, more wistful. She glanced at the faint glow of the metromite veins visible through the sphere's observation window. "You know," she began, her voice quieter, "life in Atlantis wasn't like anything you'd recognize. It was simple, but beautiful. The room grew quiet as the team leaned in, sensing the shift in her tone. Helena continued, her gaze distant, as though she could still see her world in its prime. We spent our mornings studying the stars or tending the gardens. Children would gather at the public terraces to learn the properties of crystals and how they connected to the natural world. Everything we did revolved around understanding and respecting our environment. She smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the glow of the room. Afternoons were for art. Music, painting, and poetry filled our halls, our theaters. They were unlike anything you can imagine. They were immersive spaces where music, light, and motion told stories that didn't just entertain. They transported you. Every performance felt like stepping into a dream, like you were part of something bigger. Theo tilted his head, intrigued. And communication? How did you connect with each other in a place so vast? Helena's smile deepened as she reached for the small crystal pendant hanging from her neck. We used personal crystals, each linked to the metromite veins that run through the city. They acted as conduits, allowing us to communicate across great distances. If you wore a crystal, you could reach anyone else who had one, no matter where they were in Atlantis. Theo's eyes widened. So, like a direct channel? Helena nodded. Exactly. The crystals picked up energy patterns and transmitted them through the metromite network. You could send glyphs, messages, sometimes even emotions. It was instantaneous, and there was never any interference. Jace scoffed, crossing his arms. So, let me get this straight. You guys had wireless crystal phones before we even figured out how to make a decent call without static? No drop signals, no voicemail, no, "Can you hear me now?" Meanwhile, I have to yell 3 times just to get Siri to set a reminder. He let out a dramatic sigh. I was born in the wrong civilization. Lena leaned forward, fascinated. That sounds incredible, but it must have been overwhelming at times. It could be, Helena admitted, but it was also essential, especially in moments of crisis when words would have been too slow or too clumsy. She glanced at the pendant, her expression softening. The crystals were gifts from the earth, part of the balance we were taught to honor. Kira, sitting cross-legged nearby, tilted her head. Balance? Like spirituality? Helena nodded. We worshipped balance. The sea, the earth, the stars, and not gods. We saw the metromite veins as the lifeblood of the world, a gift that connected us to everything. Our rituals weren't about asking for favors or seeking power. They were about gratitude. We had sacred groves and underwater shrines where we performed ceremonies to give thanks and renew that connection. Jace let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. That sounds like paradise. Meanwhile, in our world, we kill each other because we don't like someone else's god. He sighed, glancing around the glowing chamber. Atlantis really put us to shame, didn't it? Helena's gaze dropped and her smile turned bittersweet. It wasn't perfect, she said quietly. We had our flaws like any civilization, but we tried. We built a world where knowledge, beauty, and harmony came first. We lived in balance, taking only what we needed and always giving back. I just wish... Her voice faltered for a moment. I just wish we'd remembered how fragile that balance was before it was too late. Kira leaned back in her seat, sipping on a steaming mug of coffee, her gaze drifting toward Helena's garments. You know, Helena, Kira began, her tone curious. I've been dying to ask. What was fashion like in Atlantis? Those clothes of yours look like they belong in a museum exhibit, simple but elegant. What did your people usually wear? Helena smiled, brushing her fingers over the edge of her tunic as she considered the question. Fashion in Atlantis wasn't just about appearance, it was about harmony. Our garments were made from sea silk, a fabric woven from the threads of bioluminescent clams. It shimmered under the light, reflecting the colors of the ocean, blues, greens, and sometimes silvers, like the moon on water. Every piece was designed to move with us, light and flowing, almost like it was part of the sea itself. Kira's eyes widened, her interest piqued. Sea silk? That sounds incredible. And the bioluminescence? Your clothes literally glowed? Helena nodded, her smile deepening. They did. The glow wasn't just aesthetic, though. It symbolized life and balance. The colors often reflected a person's connection to the sea and the stars. Each thread was chosen with purpose. Jace, lounging nearby, couldn't resist chiming in. Kira, I hate to break it to you, but I don't think you could pull off Atlantis fashion. You're way too Louis Vuitton or Cartier. You'd be adding logos and sequins to those flowing ocean vibes. Kira shot him a look, half amused, half offended. Excuse me, Jace. I think I could rock bioluminescent sea silk if I wanted to. I'd probably set a new trend while I'm at it. Helena chuckled, clearly entertained by their banter. Atlantean fashion wasn't about trends or status. It was about expressing who you were as part of the whole. Everyone's clothing was unique, but it always reflected our values: beauty, simplicity, and harmony. Kira leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Okay, so your fashion sounds amazing, but what about leisure? What did people do for fun in Atlantis? Helena's expression turned wistful as her mind wandered to memories passed down by her father. Leisure wasn't just something we did when we weren't working. It was essential. We spent hours in public gardens surrounded by glowing flowers and fountains. People would gather to create art, study the stars, or simply enjoy the beauty of the world. There was no rushing, no pressure to be constantly productive. Our lives were about appreciation. Lena, that sounds peaceful, like everything had a purpose. Helena nodded. It did. Life in Atlantis wasn't about individuals. It was about us together. Resources were shared and achievements were only celebrated if they benefited the whole community. No one was left behind. We believed that strength came from unity. Kira tilted her head, a soft smile on her lips. You make it sound like paradise. Helena's smile faded slightly, replaced by a hint of sorrow. It wasn't perfect. We had disagreements, flaws, and moments of imbalance. But we always tried to find our way back to harmony. That was the heart of who we were. Jace smirked, stretching his arms behind his head. So basically, Atlantis was all about deep philosophy, glowing fashion, and chilling in magical gardens? Damn, I was born in the wrong era. I would have been their laziest, most well-dressed philosopher. Kira snorted. Jace, the only glow you're associated with is from your video game screens. The team laughed, the tension from their mission briefly dissipating. Helena's gaze drifted to the glowing veins of metromite visible through the sphere's windows, her voice soft as she added, Sometimes I wonder if the world could ever find that balance again. If humanity could live in harmony with itself and the earth? Lena, ever thoughtful, met her gaze. If we're lucky, maybe we'll carry a little piece of Atlantis with us. Enough to make a difference. Helena smiled, her eyes shimmering with quiet hope. Maybe that's why I'm here, to remind you that it's possible. Theo, always the historian, leaned forward. I'm more interested in the history. Your city, Atlantis. What was it like before everything fell apart? Helena spoke softly, describing glimpses of her life, her people, and the beauty of Atlantis before its fall. As she spoke, she glanced at Miles, her gaze lingering. Miles, sensing her eyes on him, looked back, a quiet understanding passing between them. For the first time in a long time, Helena felt something she hadn't in years. Belonging. She was no longer just a survivor of a lost world. She was part of something again, even if only for a moment. The warmth of their laughter, the ease of their conversation, and the kindness of their gestures reminded her that maybe, just maybe, hope wasn't entirely lost. Miles, Kira, and Helena moved to the briefing room, the soft hum of the sphere's systems filling the air as they settled in. In the dimly lit space, Kira stepped closer to Helena, carefully removing the earpiece she had been wearing. Let's swap this out, she said, holding up the freshly charged device. With practiced ease, she placed it on Helena's ear, adjusting it to fit snugly. This one's fully charged, she added with a small smile. Let's check if the translation works. Helena nodded after a moment, the faint hum of Kira's words now clear in her ear. It's working, she said softly, her voice even but curious as her eyes wandered over the glowing holograms rising from the round table before her. Miles stood nearby, his expression serious but kind. Helena, there's something we need to tell you, he began. He glanced at Kira, who nodded and activated Ina, the sphere's holographic AI assistant. The room darkened slightly, and the holograms shifted, displaying a montage of images. Devastating hurricanes tearing through cities, blazing wildfires swallowing forests, rising sea levels encroaching on land, and polluted skies choking the horizon. Then the imagery shifted to iconic skylines. New York City's towering buildings, London's historic bridges, and sprawling urban landscapes bustling with cars and airplanes. Miles gestured to the hologram, his voice low and solemn. "This is our world, Helena. A world facing an energy crisis, global climate change, pollution, and the greed of people who exploit what little we have left. That's why we're here, to find something that can help us change the course of our future." Helena watched the holograms intently, her gaze steady, her mind absorbing the unfamiliar yet intriguing sights. "Your world," she said after a long pause, her voice quiet but thoughtful, "is vast, intricate, complex. These roads, these cars, these flying machines, your lives seem so intertwined with your creations." She turned her eyes to Miles, searching his face. "How can I help you?" Kira stepped forward, her usual confidence wavering as her voice softened. "Helena, I don't know how to say this, but in 2 days, by tomorrow, this city, Atlantis, will be completely destroyed. A massive earthquake, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis. Everything will turn to dust and sink beneath the ocean. Nothing will survive." Ina's holograms shifted, now showing the violent cataclysms that would soon come. Raging seas, splitting earth, and the collapse of structures eerily similar to the ruins Helena called home. Helena remained perfectly still, her expression calm as she absorbed the revelation. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't even breathe a word of disbelief. Her demeanor was unnervingly relaxed. Kira frowned, puzzled. "Aren't you worried?" she asked, leaning slightly closer. Helena's eyes softened, though her face stayed composed. "Worried?" she repeated quietly, then shook her head. "My world is already destroyed, Kira. We're just waiting for the final hours. I've been living in this dead city all alone by myself. Every day is a fight to survive. I sleep each night thinking it might be my last. That tomorrow I'll be gone." She turned her gaze to Miles, her voice catching for the first time. "Until you showed up. You gave me something I hadn't had in years. A reason to live." Miles stepped closer, his voice quiet but resolute. "Trust me, Helena. I understand that. I've spent my life living for today, not knowing what tomorrow might bring. During my travels and adventures, I've realized I'm just like you. We are the same." Helena inhaled sharply, her voice trembling as she began. "I've come to terms with—" Before she could finish, Miles gently placed his hand over her lips, silencing her. "No," he said firmly, his eyes locked on her. "You're coming with us. We'll leave before the cataclysm. I won't leave you behind to die." Her voice faltered. Her fingers lightly traced the edge of her pendant, the last relic of her people. She swallowed hard, then whispered, "If I leave, then Atlantis is truly gone." The words hung in the air, heavier than the ruins around them. Miles stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Atlantis isn't the stones or the ruins, Helena. It's you. As long as you live, Atlantis lives." For the first time, Helena's stoic exterior cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, silently streaming down her face. She didn't sob, didn't wail, just let them fall. Miles reached for a tissue and handed it to her, then took her hand in his. "Hey," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "We're going to be okay. You're not alone anymore." Helena looked at him, her tears falling more freely now, though her composure remained strong. Inside, she was broken, hollow, but something about Miles's presence, his words, his conviction, planted a fragile seed of hope. Miles turned to Kira for permission, his eyes asking what his voice didn't. "How can I make this decision without you?" his look seemed to say. Kira gave him a small, knowing smile and nodded. "Helena," she said, her voice warm but firm. "We came here to preserve your world's history, to make sure Atlantis isn't forgotten. Back in our time, you're just a myth. There's no evidence you existed, no record of your people, your life, or your struggles. The people who lived and died in this city deserve to be heard. And the most important part of Atlantis' story is you. Helena's tears slowed, her gaze steady as she absorbed Kira's words. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as a survivor, not as a relic of a dead city, but as someone who mattered. Miles leaned forward, his voice steady but earnest as he looked Helena in the eye. "There's another reason we came here, Helena," he began. "We came to retrieve the Metromite, the crystal you call orichalcum. It's the key to solving the energy crisis in our world. With it, we could save billions of lives. Can you help us?" Helena's expression shifted, her calm demeanor replaced with a sharp, thoughtful gaze. She stood still for a moment, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the holographic table. Finally, she spoke, her tone steady but with a weight that silenced the room. "The orichalcum crystals are more than just a source of energy. They are the lifeblood of this city, of Atlantis. The entire ecosystem, marine life, plants, and everything that survives here. It all lives and breathes through the crystals. If you take it, everything will collapse. The city, the ecosystem, all of it. Atlantis will die." Kira stepped in, her voice gentle but resolute. "Helena, I understand, but you need to realize, by tomorrow everything is going to die anyway. The earthquakes, the tsunamis, the volcanoes, nothing is going to survive this. That's why we're here, to take the crystal before it's lost forever. It's the only chance we have." Helena's gaze hardened slightly as she turned to Kira. Her voice remained calm, yet the weight of her words struck like a blow. "There is a reason nature decided to destroy our civilization, Kira. Reasons we may never fully understand. Atlantis wasn't perfect. It thrived, yes. But we made mistakes. We reached too far thinking we could control what was never meant to be controlled. Everything is connected. This city, the crystals, the life that depends on them. If you take the orichalcum to your world, nothing good will come of it. Only destruction and pain. You'll repeat the same mistakes my people made." Her words, and for a moment, neither Miles nor Kira spoke. Miles finally broke the silence, his voice soft but determined. "Helena, we need your help. You're the only one who knows this city better than anyone. Please help us retrieve the orichalcum. This is our chance to save our world." Kira added, her tone more emotional. "Please, Helena. If there's any way, we can't do this without you." Helena let out a long breath, her resolve clear as she nodded slowly. "My parents," she said after a pause, her voice quieter now, "were the chief engineers of this city. They designed much of Atlantis, including the energy systems powered by the orichalcum. If anyone knew where the core crystal is located, it would have been them." Miles leaned closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Do you know where we can find anything? Documents, maps, anything your parents left behind?" Helena nodded. "Their office is in the eastern section of the city, near the central archives. If there are any clues about the location of the core orichalcum, they would be there." She looked between Miles and Kira, her expression serious. "I'll take you there. But I warn you, if we do this, we're not just removing a crystal. We're taking the heart of Atlantis. I hope you understand the weight of what you're asking." Miles placed a hand over his heart, his voice sincere. "I do, Helena. And I promise, we'll treat this with the respect it deserves. This isn't just about our survival. It's about preserving your world's legacy as well." Helena's lips pressed into a thin line as she glanced at the hologram of the impending cataclysms. "Then let's move quickly," she said, her voice steady. "We don't have much time.